For years, the files of Jeffrey Epstein were the greatest conspiracy theory of the modern age, a dark legend of political immunity. To fully grasp the political defeat the administration just suffered, we must first examine the firewall that was built inside Washington, specifically within the Department of Justice. For months, the fight over the late Jeffrey Epstein's files was less about his monstrosity and more about what powerful people knew, and crucially, when they knew it. Despite President Trump's repeated campaign promises of full transparency, once in office, that commitment hardened into a concrete wall of resistance. The official position from the DOJ was a clear stonewall, no more public releases, often declaring the scandal a hoax. This move was widely characterized by analysts as a calculated attempt to use the guise of protecting victims or national security to halt the political momentum of the investigation. The strategy was to let the issue die quietly. However, the problem wasn't contained to Democratic opposition. The pressure to expose the truth began boiling up from within the president's own party. This internal dissent led to an unprecedented political maneuver, the collaboration between Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna. Together, they bypassed party leadership to launch a legislative bazooka, the discharge petition, signaling the beginning of the end for the secret cover-up. This chapter of the story truly becomes cinematic. The key mechanism at play was the discharge petition, a parliamentary nuclear option that allowed members of the House to completely bypass their own leadership, specifically Speaker Johnson, who was actively shielding the administration, and force a full floor vote. This move was dependent on securing 218 signatures, meaning the president's own Republican allies had to defy him, shattering the fragile political consensus of the MAGA world. The necessary signatures were finally secured just days ago, after weeks of intense pressure and backroom chaos. When the final name was certified, the political calculus changed instantly. The cover-up was mathematically over, and the vote was forced. The White House's immediate reaction was a dramatic, public 180-degree turn. The president, who had previously dismissed the entire affair as a hoax, suddenly posted a statement urging his party to vote for the release, claiming, "We have nothing to hide." This post was widely interpreted not as a change of heart, but as a political act of surrender to overwhelming pressure. The narrative of a secret firewall was instantly cemented by this reversal, shifting the central public question from will they release the files to the far more explosive what were they trying so desperately to hide in the first place. The political crushing of the administration's defensive stance is complete. But the real story is only now beginning as we shift our focus to the documents themselves. The initial releases immediately exposed bombshells from Epstein's private estate. The most damaging revelation was an email where the financier himself, writing to a journalist, claimed that President Trump knew about the girls and had spent hours with a victim at his properties. While the White House vehemently denies this, claiming the victim mentioned never accused the president of wrongdoing, the mere existence of Epstein's explicit written claim is politically toxic and instantly shifts the burden of proof back onto the administration. However, the political drama is bipartisan. The files also sparked a viral frenzy around the other prominent political figure mentioned, Bill Clinton, after an email referencing a photo of Trump blowing Bubba went public. This required Epstein's brother to issue a public clarification that Bubba was a private individual, not the former president. The unprecedented level of dirt, rumor, and toxic speculation contained in these private files confirms that this scandal is not contained to one party. Ultimately, these viral snippets are distractions from the larger goal. The Epstein Files Transparency Act is designed to dismantle the entire government shield. This means the end of selective leaks and the beginning of forced, mandated disclosure. The new law passed by the House, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, is significant because it goes far beyond the previously released emails. It targets the Justice Department's entire investigative file, which is precisely why the Justice Department fought so hard. The scope of the mandate is breathtaking, demanding the release of three critical categories of information. First, it compels the handover of all internal DOJ, FBI, and Bureau of Prisons communications concerning the case. Second, it requires the release of the full, unredacted flight logs and travel records, finally confirming who was on those infamous planes. And third, and most critically, it demands all documentation related to Epstein's death, which the government officially ruled a suicide. This last point is the political nuclear warhead, exposing the raw, unedited internal communications that followed his death and leaving no room for the Bureau of Prisons' previous claims of incompetence or video malfunction. To deliver the fatal blow to the cover-up strategy, the new law specifically prohibits the government from redacting files purely because they cause embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. This legal clause guarantees the ultimate political exposure. The political fallout from the bipartisan vote won't stop at the White House. The momentum of this legislative hammer is so strong, it's set to hit the entire global elite network. The Epstein operation was never just a domestic issue, it was global, involving tech billionaires, European royalty, and celebrity academics. The initial trickle of document releases has already exposed and embarrassed high-profile non-political figures, such as former Harvard president Larry Summers. The true danger of the Epstein Files Transparency Act lies in the fact that the full flight logs and communications it mandates are not just a Trump problem, they are fundamentally an elite problem. The bipartisan victory for transparency is thus a definitive loss for the entire establishment that quietly enabled and protected Epstein's impunity for decades. Look, we've been following this story forever, and it always felt like a velvet rope protected these people, allowing them to remain untouchable. This vote feels like the first time that rope has been decisively yanked down. The question now is not who is involved, but how high the public is ready to look once the curtain is fully lifted. The enduring narrative of the scandal demands that we consistently acknowledge the true stakeholders, the survivors, for whom this was never a political spectacle. The largest and most moral victory here belongs to them. This entire effort, from the initial calls for justice to the final act of the discharge petition, was a grueling, terrifying fight for truth and genuine accountability. Their collective voices, channeled through dedicated advocacy and bipartisan political action, were the authentic force that finally broke the political machine's resistance. The final vote in the House, which forced the administration to comply with the law, represents the most significant victory for accountability in this case since the conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell. This moment is powerful proof that sustained public pressure, when married with focused legislative strategy, still holds the power to break through even the most heavily guarded walls of Washington and deliver justice. The clock is now ticking, and the administration has only 30 days to comply with the new law, but we must immediately ask, what are the potential traps? While the law mandates transparency, it does allow for redactions based on legitimate claims of national security or the safety of victims in ongoing investigations. The inevitable move by the Justice Department is to claim that massive amounts of sensitive material fall under these necessary exceptions. This will immediately trigger the next political fight. Are those redactions truly justified, or is this the cover-up part 2? The release will not be a single clean event. It will be a political detonation, spreading across weeks and months, initiating what we can call the era of the Epstein Files triage. Furthermore, this is not exclusively an American story. Epstein's influence spanned continents. The full travel logs and communications will inevitably implicate individuals in the UK, France, and potentially the Middle East. This bill is not simply exposing U.S. politicians, it is shining a light on a global network of enabling power that is about to feel the consequences of this unprecedented transparency effort. They were crushed. That is the final and definitive word on the administration's prolonged attempt to keep the lid on this explosive story. What we witnessed was not a political negotiation, but a true bipartisan rebellion driven by raw public outrage and an unshakable demand for justice, which ultimately broke the heavily defended political firewall. Now, as the spotlight shifts from the vote to the files themselves, the responsibility falls to the vigilant audience to oversee the next phase of disclosure. Here is the final crucial question. Do you believe this mandated release will actually deliver the full, unredacted truth? Or do you suspect that the most sensitive and politically damaging information has already been successfully scrubbed or categorized away under a convenient national security exception? We're going to be tracking the first major document dumps and the inevitable legal challenges to redactions in real time. Hit the link in the description for our source documents and hit that subscribe button, because you know we'll be here when the next bombshell drops.